everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to join us tonight. Welcome to the final event of the 3rd Singapore Literature Festival in New York City. Organized by Singapore Unbound, the New York-based literary nonprofit, this biennial festival brings together Singaporean and American authors for lively conversations about literature and society. We're an independent, volunteer-run festival funded by individual well-wishers. This year, we are proud to partner with Asia Society, Stony Brook University, Adelphi University, New York University, National Black Theatre, where we are right now, and Book Culture Bookstore and Rasa Restaurant to bring you this festival. We also acknowledge gratefully the sponsorship of Analog Candle, Electric Literature, Ethos Books, and Grey Wolf Press. The festival theme this year is Say It Differently. In a time of deep social and political divisions, we look to writers and artists to renew our ideas and discourse. Over 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and today, the festival has featured a splendid array of poets, novelists, and playwrights. Tonight, a festival first and a New York premiere. From Singapore, Cake Theatrical Productions bring us their innovative version of the classic myth of Medea. But first, this evening's double bill begins with a dramatic reading directed by Zizi Azah Abdul Majid. After the performance, there will be a talkback with the director. Unfortunately, our moderator, Kai Sunaman, is not able to make it because of some family issue, so I will be taking his place. Will you put your hands together to welcome stories from Alfian Sa'at's Malay Sketches.
Paya Lebar, 5 a.m. His mother wakes him up. He finds his way to the kitchen, then the toilet, and then performs ablutions for the Subo prayers. He doesn't like to pray with the lights on. Probably he has noticed that everything feels closer in the dark, including God. Maybe paradise is also a place of darkness. The difference being that the chosen ones will be able to see. After the ritual prayer, he sits to perform the dua, the personal entreaty. He can't think of anything particular. The exams are still months away, no medical crisis in the family. So he opts for the usual. Protect us from temptation and harm. His hands are cupped at the level of his chest. In the dark too, perhaps, God's blessings are received like a spider filament of light, pouring into the concavity of his palms, visible only to the unseen angels.
After the dusk prayers. After the dusk prayers, Mokja would climb down the few steps in front of her first-story flat with a plastic bag in her hand. She would slip into her brown rubber slippers and make her way to the park, all the while smiling to herself. At the park, Mokja would find a spot on a bench, preferably one that was not directly under a street lamp. She would look around for anyone who looked officious. She had a particular nervousness about those men in short-sleeved shirts and pants who wore a lanyard around their necks. Attached to it would be a tag, which she imagined being flashed in her face to demonstrate the person's power over her. Mokja then would untie her plastic bag and take out some sheets of newspaper to lay on the ground. She would then pinch some fish from the bag, placing them on the sheets, and then she would wait for her friends to arrive. Before long, a great tablet appeared, tentative, staring straight at Makja as if sizing her up. Makja made a soft clucking noises to encourage him. He moved closer. The advance of each timid paw calculated as if he was testing the temperature of the ground. Could he tell that she was an old woman who was incapable of chasing him? Does human age secrete its particular smell? The tabby inched forward and was soon chewing quite contentedly on the fish. Makja bent down to scratch his head and he started to purr. "Where are the rest of your friends?" she asked. Within seconds, other cats appeared, and very soon Makja's feast accompanied a total of 6. 2 of them were white and with black patches, and she asked them if they were siblings. One of them, a scrawny brown tabby, was especially vocal and would stop in the middle of nosing around the food to arch his head upwards and meow to Makja. She imagined that he was complaining. "Nene, they're not letting me have my share." She lifted him, she found out it was a her, onto her own lap, reached into her plastic bag, and fed her with her own hand. "Why is this special one so pampered?" she asked. She knew all Malay grandmothers had the same habit, to chide the grandchildren even as they were extravagantly indulging them. Makja thought about her time at the company. She had kept chickens then, and every morning she would scatter grains of rice in the compound outside the house. There was also a cat called Clements. He was very needy, hyperactive nuisance, whose favorite mode of getting attention was by weaving his body between one's legs while one was walking. The men, they all swore at him, but the women, who walked around in long sarongs, had no problem with him. Clements' favorite spot was under a hibiscus tree, outside of their home. Makja wondered what had happened to him. Sometimes, she also wondered if the practice of feeding the neighborhood cats was kind of a penance for not having brought him along as they moved. The whole family searched the kampung for him, but he was not to be found. Clements liked chasing butterflies. When Makja arrived home, her son was waiting for her.
"Mark, you can't leave the door unlocked when you leave the house. How many times do we have to remind you? We're not living in the kampung anymore, you know."
"I forgot," said Makja, brushing past him into the kitchen to wash her hands.
"And have you seen the newspapers today?" A Pontianak story. In the month of September 2001, he met a woman who was a resident at the Institute of Mental Health, where he was posted for a psychiatry attachment. She was an attractive lady in her 30s, her long hair tied in a ponytail. When she sat opposite him in the interview room, she placed her hands in a stately manner on the edge of the table, much like how a Malay bride would display her henna-stained fingers on an embroidered cushion.
"They cut my fingernails,"
she informed him, as if an explanation was required for a stiff pose. Her brittle dignity suggested to him a naked woman explaining how her clothes had been taken away. She answered his questions politely.
her date of birth, marital status, her place of origin.
She could accurately tell him the day's date, month, and year, as well as her present surroundings. And then, as if to prevent him from being lulled into routine data collection,
She voluntarily offered to him the date and circumstances of her death. It was 3 years ago, she claimed, when she had blacked out after giving birth to her child. An uncontrollable episode of postpartum hemorrhage was the coroner's report. As for her child, she was unsure of its sex. 2 failed to survive, on the account of premature status. As for her family, it was not wealthy. Mother and child were buried on the same plot. Furthermore, since they were not superstitious, they had failed to observe the proper precautionary rites, which included placing an egg in her mouth and 2 under her armpits. True enough, when she woke up, she found ample space in her mouth for the growth of fangs. These, she claimed, could not be retracted at will. And like a cat's claw, also with her arms unimpeded by eggs, she had managed to wrestle from the confines of tight swallowed white batted cloth, as well as her canopy of packed earth. She found that the same lightness which had allowed her to seek between particles of loam also allowed her to climb the air, gravity for her to no longer be a toy. And like a perverse version of the prophet's ascendancy of the seventh heavens from Jerusalem on the night of the mirage, she had her own visions as she traveled vertically through the soil, of beetles whose multi-segmented bodies and innumerable legs made them undulate as smoothly as black lacquer tongues, of hermaphroditic worms which seemed to telescope in two opposite directions, torn as they were of the pools of conflicting libidos, of the lattice of groups forming its own network of roads and aqueducts and subterranean sea. Her first task, it seemed, was to seek nourishment for her child, who, as it turned out, had been returned to her womb. But she would take no chances this time. During her first pregnancy, the problem was a kind of placental inefficiency, which denied her fetus adequate nourishment. It was her maternal duty to now seek registrants. She would hunt for sources of transfusion.
The student scribbled furiously, devouring every detail. He knew that much of what she said was technically redundant, since he had already landed on a provincial diagnosis: delusion. With possible schizophrenia, he would need to find out later if she was also prone to auditory hallucinations. But in the margins he had written his own notes. Fascinating. The patient actually believes she's a Pontianak breed. Malay ghosts who died during childbirth. Interesting how she perceives ghost bloodthirst as retaliatory. Against what? Her inseminator? A man and hence all men? Or against fate, which claimed 2 lives during an act initially designed to bring life into the world? Must write about this. An encounter in an asylum where instead of a self becoming the other, diagnosed, filed, exiled from the normal, here I meet someone who is made the other, a figure of superstition, a figure sitting just opposite my table, humanized, with a subjectivity, a countenance, and a voice. Can also write about feminism. Blood-sucking is draining the phallus of its hydraulic fuel, hence male panic and impotence. After his interview, she did indeed experience auditory hallucinations, although these were in the forms of famished wails of a baby. The student thanked the patient and proceeded to the trolley where the case files were kept. He had already fulfilled his daily quota of case interviews, but he was curious as to what other characters roamed this serendipitous ward he had been assigned to. In his lab coat and with a stethoscope slung around his neck, he looked like any other medical student. The nocturnal secret he kept from the patients was that he was also a writer who wanted to hear stories because he too wanted to feed his own child. Voracious imagination. He would be the first to admit that it was an act which could only be described in its neediness and duplicity as vampiric. Singapore by night. He didn't know when exactly the name Bob started to stick to him. It could have been when he first started helping out as a sound crew member at gigs. Bob was actually more of a designation than a nickname. It was used to describe any Malay guy who was little on the plump side, dark-skinned, and who was involved in audio engineering. Interestingly, if a Bob was more plumb than usual, he would be called Bobbo. Bob first met Susanna during a concert for local acts at the outdoor festival at the Esplanade. She was the front woman for an all-girl band called Fairy Dust Ball, which performed songs that were mainly ambient music, punctuated by minimal lyrics, recited over and over again. Susanna had a breathy little girl voice, and when she stood on stage, assumed the vulnerable knock-knee posture of the ingenue. It was a particular form of showmanship, refusing to project oneself towards the audience, but instead drawing them in towards a private, pinprick space, the space of the terse, cryptic diary entry, or a hairline crack in the heart. In fact, for most of her songs, Susanna would avoid eye contact with the audience. Hers was a solipsistic but yet strangely magnetic performance, declaring to the audience that she wanted to be understood as an enigma. During the post-show supper, Bob spotted Susanna sitting at the table just beside his. He leaned over and said, "I like what you guys did just now. It was refreshing." Bob knew that he was not entirely telling the truth. He had seen many acts like hers before, with that anxiety to claim indie cred, cleverly disguised as nonchalance towards populist antics. And honestly, a couple of Susanna's songs teetered dangerously between whimsical and twee. Susanna smiled. She had a dimple only on her left cheek, and that kind of asymmetry. What happened to the missing dimple on the right? Gave her a beauty of mysterious edge. Bob asked her who her favorite singers were.
I like Cat Power. Feist is alright.
What about closer to home?
Oh, I think Yuna's not bad. And ZIV, they're bringing a different sound to the scene because they're not belters. Not like Siti Nurhaliza or Ning Bazura and that Diane.
Diane Nurfaiza? She's got that whole R&B thing going on.
Yeah, I don't get why she's trying to sound black, but what about your favorite singers?
Bob thought for a moment. He had already told one white lie. He decided that he should not inaugurate an acquaintance with Susanna with a whole series of them. I like Saloma.
Saloma? You mean like P. Ramley's wife?
Kartina Dahari was once asked who her favorite singer was, and she said Saloma.
Kartina who?
How can you not know Kartina Dahari? She's from Singapore also.
You mean Saloma was Singapore too?
She grew up in Pasir Panjang. Actually, 4 of my favorite singers are all from Singapore. Saloma, Kartina Dahari, Rafia Buang, and Sharifa Aini. And you know the interesting thing? Saloma is Malay, Kartina is Javanese, Rafia is Bawian, and Sharifa is Arab. And they all produced amazing Malay music.
Wow, you listen to all those songs.
I was looking for songs about Singapore one day, and then I came across this song called Keroncong Singapura. It's also known as Singapura Waktu Malam by Saloma. You want to have a listen?
Sure.
Bob took out an MP3 player from his bag. He was always excited to share music with others because it allowed him to rediscover them anew through another person's ears. And then, of course, there was the image of Susanna and him, their ears linked by an airport wire. Its dimensions would force them into a specific proximity with each other, not too close, such as their shoulders would touch. No, not yet at this point, but not too far, as to stretch the wire to a state of precarious tension. The song was played. Bob wondered whether Susanna was familiar with the keroncong, that Indonesian musical style consisting of intricate interlocking melodies made by a flute, guitar, a pizzicato cello or string bass, and of course, the keroncong itself, a ukulele type instrument. The Portuguese were the ones who introduced the small guitar, adapted later by the Indonesians and also Hawaiians. And the sound it produced was a distinctively island sound. Combined with the flute, it evoked languor and listlessness, the strumming of coconut fronds by the sea breeze. Later on, Bob explained to Susanna how the keroncong for him was the meeting point between two maritime peoples, the kinship between the Portuguese saudade and the Malay rindu, both words which express a longing inexpressible in other languages. And Singapura Waktu Malam, sung in 1962, was not just about a private yearning, but a political one. The wish to merge with the Federation of Malaysia. There were those lyrics. For example,
prosperous Singapore, peaceful and harmonious, becoming richer by the day, as part of Malaysia.
These days, the only songs with the word Singapore in the lyrics are National Day songs.
I like to listen to more of these songs.
And so they exchanged numbers. Susanna insisted Bob enter her name as Susie in his phone. Over the next couple of weeks, Bob would chat with her whenever he saw that she was online and send her his favorite songs. He sometimes wished that he was still living in the 50s, where music was not so easily digitized and transferable. He would have liked to pass her vinyl records instead, because that would have necessitated a meeting. One night, Bob decided that he would not lie to himself anymore. He was falling for Susanna. And so he sent her an SMS with the word Rindu.
What? Came the reply?
I missed you. I wish we could see each other again. When I first saw you on stage that night, I knew you were the one for me. There was no reply from Susanna's side for a full 5 minutes. And then his headphone beeped.
Bob, I'm so sorry, but I don't even know your real name.
You never asked me.
I think that says it all, right? I mean, if I felt the same way about you, I would have just asked you right from the start.
Bob switched off his headphone. At some point during the past 2 weeks, he had fantasized. Bob and Susie. Those would be their pet names for each other. It was just like P. Ramley and Saloma calling each other Remy and Sally. He would listen to Saloma again. That voice of hers, so light and clear, but not airy. The vowels causing each word to expand like blown glass, given shape and weight. It would be the perfect lullaby. All he wanted to do now was to fall asleep.
Singapore by night, with its twinkling neon lights, its tall glittering stars, resplendent beyond compare. It has been written Being a poor has never been short of story.
Cold comfort. As Razmi slipped into his lab coat, what struck him was the ease of his transformation. He had entered the hospital in a long-sleeved shirt and pants like any other visitor. Now, by slinging his stethoscope around his neck, he assumed an authority which he often felt disproportionate to his age. What right was his to ask these patients the most intrusive questions, to demand their trust, to suggest to them, his face guileless, his eyes blinking, that to withhold from him the knowledge of their bodies was to deprive him of an education? Razmi sighed. His patients were his teachers. But how strange the relationship. It was the student who prepared the classroom by drawing the U-shaped curtain around the bed, the one who ended up examining the teacher. No, Razmi thought. His patients were not his teachers, as his textbooks.
There's a case at bed 26.
His course mate told him.
No Paris with breech presentation. She's got an interesting history.
His course mate's name was Cheryl, a chirpy, bespectacled girl with a habit of nodding vigorously when a senior registrar led them on board rounds. Razmi did not know much about her, except for the fact that both her parents were doctors. Sometimes he felt a certain envy at what he imagined to be her dinner table conversations. Her parents dropping names of their colleagues, Cheryl's eyes lighting up in recognition and awe, her pride at being enrolled in the elite tradition. Razmi's own parents were educated only up to secondary school level. Sometimes, stealing a look at Cheryl's unaccountably fresh morning lesson countenance, he wondered which burden of expectation was heavier, to be like one's parents, or to surpass them. You've examined her already?
Yeah, but I think she'll give you a better history. Her English is not very good.
The patient at bed 26 turned out to be a Malay girl, barely out of her teens. She had very dark, dry lips, which Razmi automatically assumed to be caused by heavy smoking. Her eyebrows had been plucked very thinly, and her hair was dyed brown, with black roots showing. When Razmi first saw her, she was staring blankly into space, a blanket drawn over her abdomen. He had speculated that she was doing so not because she was cold, but because of habit. Even at such a late stage, she was still self-conscious of her pregnancy. Hi, I am a medical student. Can I ask you a few questions? The girl looked at Razmi warily.
Just now that one girl asked me already.
Yeah, I know. If you're tired, it's all right. He felt somehow relieved and eager to retreat to the conference room where he had placed his bag, his notebooks, his real textbooks, filled with illustrations and remote photographs of Caucasian case studies, their eyes discreetly masked. He suddenly felt annoyed at Cheryl for referring this particular patient to her, as if she was trying to make a point.
You're Malay, right?
The girl suddenly asked him. She then said in Malay,
You can speak Malay, right?
Razmi nodded. He was used to interviewing Malay patients, and very often these encounters involved them confiding something in him. He was drawn into a compact, established by a shared language which guaranteed something different from mere rapport. It felt closer, but also stickier. He could only surmise that it felt like some kind of kinship. Since these patients were mostly older than him, He was for that moment alone an adopted son, an able-bodied ferryman of hopes. During my time, there are not many Malay doctors. It's good to see our people progressing. You know, these nurses from China, they don't understand English at all. Like that can become nurse. Your parents must be so proud of you. Sejuk perut mak manguntum. That last remark always made him smile. It literally meant that his mother's womb was so cold when she was carrying him. It was supposed to refer to how pregnancy was a blessed one. And yet, nothing he had studied indicated how uterine temperature had anything to do with the child's intelligence or temperament. So, this is your first? He asked the girl in Malay.
Yeah. I can't wait to give birth. I haven't touched a cigarette in 9 months. So what do you want to ask me?
Over the next few minutes, Rasmi solicited her history. There was a checklist in his notebook, which he went through methodically. Apparently, the girl had been informed that there was a possibility of forceps delivery.
Oh, he kicked so hard. I think he kicked around so much until he's now upside down. You know where he got his kicks from? His father's a football player.
A professional player? What's his name?
I don't want to mention his name. I don't want to shame him. He's got his own career, his own life now. He's got another girlfriend already.
Rasmi had given her the benefit of the doubt. But here she was, revealing herself as yet another unsavory statistic. The unwed teenage mother from the problem minority. Was it because of people like her that Rasmi chose to study medicine? He wondered whether the girl had told Cheryl that her pregnancy was unplanned. He felt angry all of a sudden, as if she had undone all the work he had put in to cultivate an image agreeable under the gaze of those like Cheryl.
You got a girlfriend?
Was this some kind of flirtation? Rasmi spoke without looking at her. No. And then he raised his face to square against hers, surprised at how irritated, even sarcastic he sounded. I think I'm still too young to get into a relationship. There are more important things in life. I want to think carefully about my future. The girl sensed Rasmi's prickliness.
I'm not trying to tackle you. You're going to be a doctor. Guys like you don't look at girls like me. They usually go for Chinese girls. I'm just asking only. Anyway, what's your name?
Rasmi cleared his throat. Rasmi, he said in a small voice.
It's a very nice name. What does it mean?
I'm not sure.
Maybe I'll name my baby Rasmi. Then when he grows up, he can become a doctor too.
Rasmi did not know what to say. He wanted to share with the girl that his parents were fans of a Malay singer called R. Azmi. But he was afraid that she would recognize the name and involve him in conversation. He saw Cheryl enter the ward, smiling, looking congenial and authoritative at the same time.
So you're not having many interviews today? She said to the girl. Are you guys done? I'm thinking of grabbing lunch.
Yeah, we're finished. Cheryl turned to the girl and affected a look of concern.
We better let you rest. Are you still feeling cold?
The girl smiled.
A bit. But not my legs. More my stomach.
She looked at Rasmi and said jokingly,
Syrup, syrup.
the final adhesive, flimsy, worth a laugh. before Razmi peeled himself away from her world and rejoined his own, to discuss the complications of her pregnancy with Cheryl at the air-conditioned cafeteria downstairs.
Losing touch. Last Saturday, at a prize-giving ceremony for top Malay-Muslim students, I had walked up to the stage to collect my scroll. Everything went as we had rehearsed, up until the moment I was face-to-face with the president. Suddenly, I froze, snatched the scroll from the tray held by the girl beside him, and left his hand frozen in mid-air. Of course, the protocol was that I should shake his hand, but I was wearing a baju kurung and a tudong. The president is a man, and I'm not supposed to have any physical contact with the opposite sex. That's a kind of protocol, too. It was difficult to bring people around to my point of view. My mother said I had shamed the whole community with my rudeness. My father said, when you do something like that, it's so easy for them to call us extremists. My sister said, you dishonor the guest of honor. I didn't know how many people in the audience thought the way my family did. I made my sister describe what the scene looked like to her. You made him look so stupid, she said. He was reaching out his hand so proudly. Proudly? Yeah. What? You were the only girl wearing the tudong among all the students. He probably thought, oh, this is a girl who can balance between studies and religion. And then you had to spoil everything. So what did the audience think? People were shocked. He really looked stupid. His one hand sticking out like the Kentucky Fried Chicken kernel, you know? But just one hand long. Some people didn't know whether to continue clapping or what. So, overnight, I began to be this poster girl for Malay non-integration. Apparently, the president, in his memoirs to be written years down the road, would one day describe how Malays have become more and more fundamentalist, just because a panicky girl one day decided not to shake his hand. As damage control, my sister suggested that I write a letter to the president. I showed her the first draft. You're not apologizing, she said. You're justifying what you did. No, I'm not. I'm educating him. She rolled her eyes. You next! Educate the president? Who are you? I wrote a second draft. This time, removing the parts that argued that the handshake wasn't even part of our culture, I turned down all the rhetorical bits that began with you as a fellow minority member should. I focused on the fact that I had never meant to offend. When I reached to the post box later that day, I found myself confronted with two slots. Singapore and other countries. It made me pause for a while. My sister had asked who I was. What kind of country did I see myself living in? What kind of country did I want for myself? I wasn't different for the sake of being different. And being different is not the same as being difficult. I rested the envelope on the lip of the slot that said, Singapore. I'll describe the scene for you. There's a girl standing in front of a post box. She is wearing a baju kurung and a tudong. And the envelope has just dropped, like a leaf from her finger. But she is still standing, her hand frozen in mid-air.
two brothers. Helmi, my older brother, 5 to 10 minutes, arrived one Saturday evening in a brand new BMW in gleaming gunmetal blue. He was taking us, our parents and I, for a dinner at a buffet restaurant near Utru. His number plate, however, was the same one he had for his previous car, beginning with the letters WMD. It was a joke he never tired of telling, that the Americans were looking in the wrong place for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They should have tried the suburbs of Tamam Tum Dr. Ismail instead. At the restaurant, which served Indonesian cuisine, Helmi mentioned how difficult it was to get good Malay food in Singapore. He told us of spreads where they served 20 varieties of pulang, or Malay raw salad. He spoke about nasi kerabu, that Malaysian East Coast delicacy consisting of rice that was tinted blue from butterfly pea flowers.
The next time we go to KL, remind me to take you to eat kampung baru.
Helmi has been trying to persuade us to relocate to Kuala Lumpur ever since he received his Malaysian PR 3 years ago. He has been working as an account manager for a private television station for 10 years prior to that, and was now making this exponential ascent up the corporate ranks. I, on the other hand, was working as a documentary cameraman in Singapore. While sipping from a glass of avocado juice, Helmi said,
I thought you were going to send me your resume.
I haven't had the time yet.
The last time I asked you 3 months ago.
I've been busy. We just shot a documentary in Medan last month.
I've already prepared a letter of recommendation.
I could see that our parents were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They knew how much I resented Helmi trying to dispense favors, which was his way of asserting his big brother superiority, and trying to exaggerate what was a negligible head start in life. I knew better than to start picking a fight with him over dinner. At the same time, I could not resist correcting his perception that our well-being was dependent on his patronage. I've told you before, I don't need you pulling strings for me.
Someone at your age would be a producer already by now.
But I don't like producing. I like being on the ground. I like working with equipment. Can't we just have a quiet dinner for once? My father interrupted. You shouldn't be crawling in front of food. Later that night, after our parents went to sleep, Helmi approached me in the living room while I was watching a DVD. I muted the sound and watched him as he sat in an armchair beside me, holding a cup of coffee in his hand.
Mom told me about what happened on the bus.
It's an isolated incident.
It's going to become more common.
How do you know?
Azari, listen to me. This place is changing. It's not the same place we grew up in. Did you ever think they hired bus drivers from China one day? Who can't even speak a word of English? How is someone like Mark supposed to ask for directions? Do they expect us to pick up Mandarin?
There's nothing wrong with learning a new language.
You know, when Mark and Aya lived in the kampung, they spoke to their Chinese neighbors in Malay. And for our generation, we use English. What do you think the next generation will use? They're creating this environment where you'll lose out if you don't speak it. And they're using market forces to do this. Your important monolingual speakers put pressure on
They're
us.
cheap labor. Helmi, that's all. You're reading too much into it.
Then what about the whole policy to keep the Chinese in Singapore at 75%? Because they have the lowest replacement rate. Then the numbers needed to be taught by Chinese from overseas. So what does that say to you? Which comes first then? Being Singaporean or Chinese?
I heard that in Malaysia, it's easier to become a resident if you're Indonesian. Helmi stirred his coffee and sipped from his cup. I wondered whether he had trouble sleeping at night like me. Sometimes after tossing and turning, I would make myself a cup of coffee and cross the threshold to definite wakefulness. It was better to be awake and get some work done, for me, mostly reading or watching DVDs, than to work myself to a state of sleep. I looked at Helmi's face, trying to spot the telltale dark circles that greeted me in the mirror as dawn broke.
We're the same, Azari.
He suddenly remarked. It was as if he read my mind. What do you mean?
I used to think that things were different in Singapore. I thought we had different rules, different standards. But I realized we're the same. When it comes down to it, it's all about race. Sons of the soil, sons of the yellow emperor, they're just the same. But being the same doesn't mean being equal. Either dominate or be dominated.
So you go to where you can dominate?
There's no future for us in Singapore.
Helmi, our past is in Singapore.
What past are you talking about? Look at what happened to the Malay settlement in Eunos, to the Istana Kampung Glam, to Bidadari.
So if we all leave, then who's going to stay behind?
Helmi Sa'at. You're always a sentimental.
And what about you?
I'm pragmatic, as we.
That's very Singaporean of you. Helmi. Maybe you're much more Singaporean than you think. Helmi smiled and took another sip from his cup. I knew that no more words on the matter needed to be exchanged. For now, at least. The kind of silence had begun to settle between us. A silence that could either mean an impasse or a truce.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Could you please give another round of applause to Director Zizi Azah Abdul Majid, to Jay, and to Dawn, our actors for this evening. I'm just going to ask them a couple of questions and I'm going to actually open it to the floor because I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask of Zizi, the director, as well as the actors in actually translating this book of short stories, Malay Sketches by Alfian Sa'at, to the stage. First of all, the question to Zizi. Malay Sketches was actually published in Singapore in 2012. When did you first encounter the book and what was your first reaction to it?
I think I encountered the book pretty much when it was first published, and I absolutely loved it, as I do with a lot of Alfian's writing, where it's deeply empathetic, and I think he also writes a lot. He writes about a spectrum of the Malay community. Like, he doesn't just focus on one part of the Malay community, but the stories cover a wide range of different sort of Malay experiences. And he does justice to those voices, where he deals with very complex issues and complex situations.
Thank you. And my next question is really for Zizi as well as for the actors as well. In actually bringing these stories to a stage here in New York, what were some of the challenges for you, as creatives?
I think it was very interesting, sort of thinking about the stories about Malay people, but they're not very Malay people in New York City, and they're not very Malay Singaporeans in New York City, and actors as well. And so when I thought about it, I thought it would be really interesting to find actors who could connect to the stories, because I think the stories have a lot of universal values. And so I would like to hand the mic over to the actor.
Sure. Just as you said, I think what's amazing about this writing is that there's universality to it, but also that there's this so specific to the Singaporean culture, and it creates this really cool effect where it's part alienation, where I haven't lived that culture, but but at the same time, it touches the human condition that is so like understandable, and it kind of makes me like realize that like even in my own culture, I have things that people in other cultures won't be able to understand, like on the surface, but I think deep down it's all rooted to human struggle and the human condition. So I think just touching on that was what helped me connect and relate to the material.
Jay, before we hear Dawn, do you think it's perhaps give us a few examples of what you mean? I mean, how does living in America connect with what you have read, the stories?
Well, for example, I think one of my favorite lines, I'm going to misquote it, is she said, in the last story, Helmi asked, are you Singaporean or are you Chinese? And it's a struggle that I have as, so I was born in Korea, I grew up in New Zealand, and then I came to America 8 years ago. So my identity is constantly being tossed around and people are like, where are you from? Who are you? What are you? When I'm with Koreans, I don't feel like I'm full Korean. When I'm with Americans, I can't say I'm an Asian American. When I'm back in New Zealand, I have an American accent now, partially. So I'm like excluded there as well. So there's that struggle that, you know, to find one place and ground in this is a society that's constantly been toppled by different cultures who try to assume authority. Yeah, that's one of the examples. Of course.
Hello, everyone. I think in order for me to delve into the story, I kind of use my imagination as an actor. Also just being like an African American woman, a person of color, a person from Alabama as well, you know, coming to New York. Losing Touch was like that story that I gravitated to the most because being part of my family, there's not a lot of people in the arts. So it's all about her making a choice and making that choice that is best for her and best for her life. And I've been there before. I think we've all been there before where we're trying to make that decision of trying to find our identity, and I'm still trying to figure that out now as a woman in New York. And just as an artist. So Zizi helped me a lot to just try to delve into the stories and figure out how can I like hone on to something and attach to it. But it was beautiful.
Thank you. I thought you actually brought so much out of those stories, both of you. Thank you very much. For either Zizi, the director, or the actors.
Hi, first of all, I just want to thank all three of you. It was a wonderful performance, and there were parts of it which really moved me, so thank you very much for that. I have a question for the two actors. So as people who are not familiar with the Singapore culture, was there anything you learned from the stories that surprised you about Singapore that was unexpected?
Absolutely. Pontianak. Watch out. No, but just it's a country that I have Singaporean friends, but I never had. I'm guilty of saying this, but I had never had the curiosity to ask them about Singapore. It was just like, oh, you're from Singapore. I love your airport. So surface and so immature of me. But after having talked about these stories and whatnot, I've come to realize just like how much the country has come, like what the country has gone through politically, you know, culturally, socially, and it's you know, I just watched Crazy Rich Asians, and I don't know, there's something about, you know, when you watch that movie, there are people from all, like, they're all different Asians all in that movie, right? So it's kind of made me think of like how diverse of a country Singapore is, but also how
rooted in that diversity is also a lot of battles that still are prevalent, and yeah, it's hard to like form an opinion on that, but it's just left me with the thought of like, it's a struggle, and I think it's so important to therefore like share these stories to incite awareness, and yeah.
For me, I was completely clueless. So Zizi took me through a whole entire lesson, a history lesson. One thing that stood out to me was the tudong, the baju hiram, I'm saying correctly, and just how I want to say just in the Malay, just the culture and everything. How just being here in New York, they're just considered as a minority. As well, and she just told me how it's sometimes hard to find, your people, as well. And I totally could sympathize with that as well, but it was just pretty much an eye-opening experience. I was just like, Jay, I did not know a lot at all, but it's good to know and become aware, and I feel like because of it, I'm an aware actor, and an aware person, too, so.
It was a gift,
Yeah,
to be able to, yeah.
Oh, and to also piggyback off that, for her to choose us who's not a part of it at all, to just come in and be creative, to just figure that out. So I thought that was really cool.
Just one last thing, I think what's really cool is that, I think for actors, there's a lot of issues about being specific with casting. Like if it's a black character, it has to be black. If it's Asian, it has to be Asian, and stuff like that. But there's just, through this experience, I realized the gift of being able to speak another country, another culture's voice. That was just so enlightening, and I know it's kind of expanded my perception on what's okay casting.
I just wanted to add on to that. One of the stories that I shared with Dawn was about the experience of wearing a tudong in Singapore, which is the Malay word for the headscarf. And I was talking about it and the protocol and expectations of behavior and all that. And Dawn actually interestingly compared it to how when she goes to church as a kid, her grandmother would always be on her to put on stockings.
The deep south.
When it's really warm. And it's like a similarity of experience of, the experience of modesty and expectations of female behavior, which transcends across cultures.
Oh, hi. This is a question for Zizi. Thank you so much for this play. So my question is, a lot of the materials chosen for this play has to play with generational gaps. Like Piramli, Saloma, Keroncong, and the kampong experience. How do you feel that you were trying to convey, even to Singaporean, audiences here, this sort of generational shift, especially to the younger ones, what Piramli, what kampong experience means, what's your process and experience there?
I think the way I structured the narrative of the stories that I chose was I specifically wanted to start with a sense of the old Singapore, what the Malay experience was like, which maybe in the 50s and 60s, which is why I started with the story about this man who prays in the morning, and then the Pontianak stories, of course, of Malay folklore, and then referencing the sort of old music. And it was really fascinating, truly such a wonderful experience to hear such old Malay music here in Harlem, in New York City. It's so wonderful how that can transcend. And also, I also then wanted to go into a sense of the shift into the modern Malay experience. The sweet story of the two people who, Bob, who wants to fall in love. And then, of course, then the stories, but then about racial identity and the tension and sort of the struggle of wanting to retain your sense of Malayness and what Malayness means in Singapore, in present-day Singapore, and how that's the tussle for your space in Singapore society, which I think is very strong in the final story that they read about the two brothers.
What I hear is that you were dealing with the theme of generations, not just within the story, but also across the stories, in the way you sequence.
Yes, absolutely.
That for us tonight. There is just one last question from someone. I see a hand at the back. Is that a hand? That's a question in front. Someone's coming with a mic.
Thank you so much for the performance, and I think this question is mainly for Zizi, but perhaps also for other Singaporeans in the room who are hearing these words anew. So when I read Alfian's poetry, the way I heard the words, of course, was in the accent that I remembered. And of course, when I first heard the performance, in the first couple of minutes, it felt a bit jarring. But as I started listening, I began to hear the words anew and began to see new perspectives because it wasn't the way I expected it performed. I wonder, and it was, lovely, and I wonder whether Zizi, as you were rehearsing, you saw new things in the words as well because these were being embodied by different voices and people from different cultures.
Yes, I think absolutely. It was really quite stunning to be sitting in a room with the two of them and hearing familiar words like, bidadari and kuntiana, and it's said in an American accent. And so it makes me miss home, but at the same time simultaneously reflect on what is home. And is home framed within an accent? Is home something larger than that? Something that is in nostalgia, in a memory, in a sense, in another more complex sense than just the accent. Because we often think like when we're going to meet Singaporeans, we will just slip back into speaking as Singaporeans. So it was very, very wonderful to be in a room with them and just having that distance and that other layer to it.
Thank you very much. And perhaps during the reception, you can grab all of them and ask them more of your questions. Because we've come to the end of the first part of the double reveal for this evening, we will now have an intermission of 20 minutes before the second part, which is of course Cake's production of Medea. Alright, we have the festival authors' books on sale outside, so please avail yourselves of them. And also please enjoy the reception tonight, which is sponsored by Patsy Liu Maker. All festival events are actually free and open to the public. If you like what you've seen so far, please consider giving a donation to our volunteers at the door. All donations go towards funding the Singapore Unbound Fellowship to bring an emerging Singapore writer to New York. Just one last note, please don't leave your valuables behind because we won't have anybody looking after them. We'll see you in 20 minutes time. Thank you everyone.